Welcome back to AP Human Geography. We're still looking at population and we're going to start looking more at migration as well. But I just got done talking with you about population pyramids, and now I want to talk with you about the demographic transition. Let's do this. So to keep things simple, what I've done is I've drawn out a picture of the demographic transition using my spectacular Renaissance art skills. No, okay, so I'm not such a great artist, but still, my illustration does a good enough job, I think, at showing you guys how the demographic transition works. So, we're going to look at it simplistically first, and assume that there are four different stages of the demographic transition. Now, what is the demographic transition? Well, demographics having to do with population, transition having to do with changes over time, and so we're going to look at how population has increased since the peopling of the earth all the way up into the present day, and the demographic transition is a good way of doing that. So before I get started, I want to look at this picture here that I also drew, which kind of shows how the populations have remained level throughout the majority of human history up until, like, you know, the Industrial Revolution, when first we start to feed people more with our second agricultural revolution. With more food means, less farmers making more food means that more people can move out into the cities and rely on the hard work of a few farmers to produce enough food for everyone, which then enabled them to start working in these factories where they made more money. With more money, you could buy better stuff and more food and live longer, and then eventually healthcare and things like this. And so it hasn't slowed down since. Now we have way too many people, or at least a lot of people, and some people are afraid we have too many people, and the population is still geared to get to somewhere around 9.5 to maybe even 10 billion, and by some projections more than that, people on Earth before it starts to level out. The demographic transition helps us to understand how population has done this, and then consider, like with population pyramids, what might be yet to come. Stage 1. Basically, today there are no countries anymore that's in stage 1, but throughout the majority of human history, that's where we basically were at, okay? So it works out like this. Population over that huge amount of time steadily grew, but very, 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 very slowly. For the majority of human history, we have not had more than 1 billion people on Earth, right? But then also, throughout the periods, you may have periods of birth, coupled with death, coupled with birth, coupled with death. For example, you might have periods of peace and prosperity during, like, for example, the Roman Pax Romana, or other times throughout history when there wasn't as much death and disease and starvation and war and all this. But then you might also have periods like the Middle Ages when bubonic plague ravaged Europe and killed out half the population in that area. You might have wars here and there that are going to limit population growth, and so that's the reason why in stage 1 you see these squiggly lines here that kind of go all the way across, representing the ups and downs of birth rate consistently throughout the majority of human history. Then, in stage 2, something starts to happen because of agricultural revolution, coupled with industrial revolution that led to more food and health and their standard of living and money to be able to pay for your kids when they get sick, or feed them more, or whatever it might be that helps to increase population. More of those kids that people are having start to live, and it causes the population to basically swell up. And so in stage 2, we still have that really, 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 really high birth rate, and then the death rate begins to decline. The area in between the two lines represents the growth. That is the natural increase. And so you can see on my demographic transition chart, I've got the orange line that starts to go up, representing that population growth starting with stage 2. So the important thing to remember about stage 2 is that you see this decrease in death rates, in particular your infant and child mortality rates, but people are living longer in general, and that leads to their population decrease. You do not have an increase of births. Your birth rate remains high like it was in stage 1, but it does not increase. That wouldn't make sense. All right? Instead, death rate declines, population grows. In stage 3, people start saying, oh, wait a second, I don't want to have all these kids. My kids are living, they're not dying. And so eventually, you still have a high birth rate, but the birth rate starts to decrease, okay? And then the death rate is decreasing even more and getting outright low towards the end of stage 3. What are the reasons for this? Well, people start to keep in mind the idea that, hey, if I have all these kids, they live, and I don't have the money to pay for them. Plus, I want to be able to put my kids through college. I want to be able to give them opportunities so they can engage in the globalized economy and have more of a chance to be more successful than we did. And so many of these people start to move to cities and start to take jobs in maybe industry, and also service type jobs start to become available in some of your stage 3 countries, which mean that people have more money to spend. If people have more money to spend, they're spending on services like healthcare and education and things that are going to help them to go on further in life and expand their careers or get some kind of career knowledge or experience. And then eventually they're going to have a better standard of living. And over a few generations, your birth rates decrease to the point that that you're maybe having 2 or 3 kids instead of 6 or 7, and then your death rate means that people are living to be longer, so you have a larger amount of people in their elderly years are starting to survive. And so population is growing, but the natural increase is not quite as much. Population still might grow even exponentially, but natural increase might go down as birth rates start to decline and death rates remain really, really low towards the end of stage 3. This right here sets us up for stage 4. All the countries in the developed world are basically stage 4 countries. Now, sometimes I've heard where people say, well, the United States is really a stage 3 country. No, I'm going to say the United States is stage 4. And the reason is, if you look back at the population pyramid video that I made, you basically see where if you look at just the raw natural increase in the United States, the population is basically stable. And so you're not seeing population growth due to total fertility. It's the replenishing rate, about 2.1 kids in the U.S. The reason why the U.S. population grows is because of migration. And so many of your developed countries have reached a point where they may be replenishing the population. If you look at my stage 4, death rates are really low, birth rates match the death rates. And so population does not grow in a stage 4 country. Okay, examples of this: United States, Great Britain, most of Europe, France, for example. You've got others, in Europe and Australia, Canada, all these different developed countries, the ones we think about when we think about the West, are going to be good examples of stage 4 countries. But there's a twist. Geographers today say they might be actually at stage 5. Okay, so what I actually mean by that is that some geographers consider when the population starts to decline due to your amount of births actually once again kind of exceeding the deaths, then this means that I just said that backwards. When the amount of deaths starts to actually exceed the amount of births, then this represents what some geographers will say is a stage 5 of the demographic transition. It's due to high levels of development, but you start to see where they're not replenishing the population. Examples of this are Germany and Japan and Italy, and these are all countries where you start to see a decrease in the population. Okay, stage 4 means you're still leveling out. Other geographers aren't going to say that stage 4. They're going to say that is a part of the latter half of stage 5. But I want you guys to be familiar with the idea behind there being 4 stages and 5 stages. Just know that all they mean by stage 5 would be that population starts to decline because levels of development mean less and less people are having kids, and kids are kind of a liability, so not as many people are having them. So there you go. There's my quickest attempt at explaining the demographic transition in its most basic form. We're going to do more on this in class. If you like what I'm talking about here in Human Geography, feel free to click subscribe. I appreciate you guys listening to everything I have to say.